good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Raising Excellence, the most important 90 minutes of your day. I'm Michael, the MC and Opportunity Ambassador today for our show. And our show's title is What the
WTF.
F Are We Doing Today? But before we get to that topic, let's talk to my fellow co host, Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator,
Nice to be here.
Willow, our trauma consultant,
Hi, everyone.
and Dennis, our freedom facilitator.
Blessed love, everybody. Great to be with you.
Dennis,
So
can you?
we're,
Sorry, I didn't notice this earlier. Can you lower your camera a bit? You're looking just above the sign like this.
Did I put the camera on too high of a pedestal?
Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
so in addition to that, we are kind of running on the fly today. We're gonna try and just do kind of an ad lib show today because we've got a lot of interesting things to possibly talk about, but we're just going to kind of hit it on the fly. So what are we doing today? What is everybody doing today? What do we want to talk about?
What do you want to talk about, Michael?
Well, I've got plenty of things to talk about, but I want to go around the room before I throw out my
You mean
idea.
you're going to take us deep? Deep. All right.
We'll see.
Let's start with Willow.
I gardened today and didn't really get rid of a bunch of stuff, but set it all out on my porch. So if anybody knows me in person, I have a bunch of stuff on my porch that I'm trying to sell. Feel free to come and rifle through it. Stuff is all size small, size 6.5 shoes. Sorry. That's all I did today is literally like set out garage sale stuff, made prices, and cleaned out my closet and gardened, which was my favorite part of the day. I have this newfound addiction to gardening and repotting my little seedlings and watching stuff grow. That was my day.
Cool.
Yeah, from what I hear, gardening is kind of addicting.
Oh, and I did a couple sessions today. I forget that I actually did work today.
Nice.
It's like conversations with friends, so sometimes I forget. I'm like, oh yeah, I did like do a session with people. So
Nice.
Nice one.
Dennis?
I love the thanks. I love the gardening intro because I remember like these days I've been out in the garden as well, and I did something that I got pretty good at, which is transform stuff other people throw away into something that is valuable. And when we moved recently, we had this whole big ass house like full of like 50 years of old stuff, and it was a restaurant and old chairs and tables, and I was like looking at that stuff and I was like, oh my god, like I can't just like throw it out there, but no, leave it and throw it out and I can't use it again. I tried to sell some stuff and it didn't really sell so well. And then so there was this bunch of like wood and cupboards, and I made them small and I fold them up and destroy them, but I couldn't just, it's like all wood. And like I was like, well, if I was in Kingston right now, like I would build a half a city like with all this stuff, and like I can't just throw it away. So I got a friend and like we load everything on the truck. And it was like, I thought it would be probably like 3 truckloads, but it was like 5 or 6 of them. And we have a garage, but we don't have a drive, you know. So I pack up the garage, like you couldn't even breathe in the garage because it was just full, a huge ass garage, like full of all kind of stuff. And so in the last few days and weeks, like I took time and I took out like those pieces of woods and old cupboards and stuff, and I will cut them up, like, and I made up a bunch of plant beds, like, raised plant beds. So the garden has been
Nice.
like filling up with plant beds, and then of course like they take a lot of soil. But this garden that here was really lush, so and nobody like cut it for like 9 years. So I cut back some of that, and then I put all the branches and the old leaves like in the bottom, and then like I always wanted a pond, and the owner of the place didn't really say anything much against it, so I started digging up a pond. So now like one day I built one of the raised plant beds, and then I chopped some leaves and some branches and put them in there, and then I dig the pond a little bit, and then I take the soil and put the soil that was in the like where the pond is going to be right now, and put it in the plant bed. So I'm building cycles and keeping stuff in place and reusing stuff and like friends, and like every time they come, like, oh wow, what is this? And, oh, wow, that's the old shit that you told me to throw away 2 weeks ago. It looked beautiful now. Yeah, oh yeah, wow, I didn't know it. So that's nice. Like I love those things, like to make use of things that, or to make things valuable that other people don't see it again, that we're not able to see the value in it.
Can you tell us more
So
about cycles? I'm curious. You said building cycles. That's really an interesting concept.
really, it's not building them. Like that's a permaculture thing, like I'm into permaculture, and I did a permaculture design course years back, and really I don't feel like I'm creating those cycles, but it's seeing the cycles that are there and using them. So it's the human component in permaculture is that you add the design, but nature already has cycles, right? So there's certain plants, that grow close to each other, that partner, that support each other. One gives shade, the other one brings up nutrients. So there's synergies in nature that happen not only between plants but also between plants, animals, and the human factor can be, and which is the amazing thing that really blew my mind in terms of permaculture, because I feel that is it is an art, it's a design um, that mm, that really that shows us that we as humans can be, and we have the potential of be a blessing to our world, to our physical world as well, and not like some people try to tell, and some people actually are like a curse, like it doesn't necessarily have to be like that, but we can actually, if we do it right, we can use the natural forces that are inherent in our world, and we can observe nature, and we can work with nature and actually be part of that greater harmony that exists, instead of being ignorant and destroying it and using it only for our own personal gain. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of. So those cycles that exist is is something that you can use for yourself and for others as well. So there's the sun, there's force, there's wind, there's water, there's rain in the landscape, and so there's old stuff being thrown away for free. So it's like, oh, it's like looking at things with different eyes. So instead of seeing the problem, you see the solution. It's like, oh, it's an old cupboard or whatever. Oh, but this wood is actually pretty sturdy, and what could I do with this? Oh, I could put it together with that one, and then it's going to be a raised plant bed, and then that's going to be growing my, oh, see what is, you know what that is? You ever
Spinach?
seen it before? No, it's stevia. They call it
Ah,
stevia, sweet herb or so, but it's stevia really. Ever heard about that? That's really a whole topic in itself as
sweetener,
well. Yeah, it's
kind
a
of a
sweetener. It's
substitute sweetener.
Yeah, it's from Paraguay, I believe, originally. That's where it's grown, and it's a bush, a tropical, a subtropical plant that grows pretty bushy, a couple feet high actually, or even more, like 3, 4, 5, 6 feet, I believe, and the leaves are so sweet. They are much more sweeter than actually sugar, and a few years back it became a hype, and here in Germany it's actually so effective that the sugar industry, when they became aware of it, they kind of banned it, because they saw a huge competition in it. The thing is that it's very sweet, much sweeter than sugar, but it doesn't raise your blood sugar. So it doesn't have any of the negative aspects of sugar, or even worse, artificial sweetness. So anyway, like I just got one of these little bags with some seeds, and that's going to be the project for tomorrow. And I grew some of them in Jamaica, and then we got them to like a little bush size already, and I took them up to the mountain and I planted out, and I was watching it for like 2 days, and the third day when I came back, I saw, oh, there's a piece missing. I was like, oh, what's going on? And then I realized that what they call in Jamaica bush rats were also enjoying the sweetness of it. So after weeks of bringing those
You
seeds from
gotta
Germany to
you gotta put a cage around it to
yes, I
keep
did,
it
but it
from.
was too late. So the bush rat got to it. Oh boy, yeah, that's stevia. So that's like another, I guess, cycle. That's like,
What's a
wow,
bush
growing.
rat?
A bushrat is uh,
It's
probably
a
a rat that
rat
lives
that
in the
lives
bush.
in the bush. I thought it was some kind of, like you cross a pig with a rabbit and a rat, and then you have this weird Jamaican bush rat, but just regular rats that live in the bush.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, they're not like, the big nasty looking like gully rats with long ass tails, and there's like, it's like a rat, but it's not like the nasty gully urban ones, I would imagine.
I think he's
It's
like
seen more
like a
rats.
weasel, like a
yeah, something
weasel.
like that.
I
Yeah.
think you've seen more
Yeah.
rats than I have in your life.
You have all kind of rats in Jamaica. You have, what a rat bat is?
a flying rat, a rat
Exactly.
that flies.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a flying
I
rat.
don't
So
know
it's
about
a
that.
what's the other English name for that? I forgot that now, channel.
A
Uh,
rat bat? Is that
yeah,
what you said?
yeah. Is there
Oh,
blood sucking in Brazil? They call it morcego.
It's a
like
blood-sucking
a
animal,
vampire bat. Vampire bat
and
for
he
those
A
actually
who
bat.
know.
Yeah, you
bites.
call it bats, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in
Yeah.
Jamaica, it's a rat bat.
But honestly, I've got bats here, man. I love the bats. The bats eat all the insects, so the bats are good.
Well, the
Definitely, yeah.
bats that I've seen at the lakes here in Canada, they're lovely, and they just buzz around eating mosquitoes. It's quite pleasant. But this venom, no, toothy flying rat that attacks humans on sight, that's not a pleasant and
I
that's
think
not
they
a
suck fruits
pleasant
as well,
thing.
like mangoes and stuff.
Mm.
The fruit juice. I'm actually not sure. Is it like with the mosquitoes, or is only the females that suck the blood and the males are just? I'm not sure about the rats. I
I
have to
don't
research
know.
that.
I think that a
The
flying
rat bats,
rat
maybe.
that wants to drink my blood is one of my least favorite visuals to date. I'm not a fan. Let's talk about egregors. They're
All
not
right.
demonic and
Well,
they're not evil. Let's start with that.
Who is that? Another
Um,
well,
man?
actually there could be. There
they
could
could
be.
be.
There's
They
because
could
there's
be.
evil
Absolutely.
egregors too.
They're yes, they're just as demonic and evil as a knife is. A knife could be demonic and evil.
A
No.
knife.
No, a knife couldn't be demonic and evil, could it? It's just the user that's demonic and evil. Maybe even not, just confused.
Yeah, well, in regard to the egregor thing, like walking around in the town over the past few days, I see a lot of people wearing masks, and to some degree being fearful of like what's the possibilities of other people giving them stuff. And honestly, to me, it looks like an egregor. It looks like a kind of a mental trap that people have got themselves into, where they're wearing the mask because they're in some cases they're trying to comply or whatever, or maybe it's their bosses telling them to do it, but it's contributing to this mass like fear that's going on. And although here in Acapulco people are generally super duper friendly and non-judgmental, and so the people that are walking around without masks, they're not getting like dirty looks or anything like that. But I can definitely feel there's like that vibe from some people that there's a genuine fear.
But
And
hold on.
I can only see this thing going worse as they keep trying to hit on the other fears that are coming along.
If I would have never heard the word egregor, like I probably would be like, what we're talking about now?
Yeah, you
Is it
probably
is
would
it
be.
how
Michael has just
what
looked
would be
up the definition today, so I'm sure he's got it at his fingertips.
Let's don't give me a few minutes here.
she set you up big time.
Eric has found a very interesting movie about the egregor, and it talks about the egregor of the family. It's in French, but I don't think it's ununderstandable if you know what the movie's about, like if you were to watch it without knowing French, because there's a lot of action. So every person in the family, there's like a pitcher of empty pitcher actually at the beginning, and then the dad pours a cup, and then the mom pours a cup, and then the kids pour a cup, and eventually it's a big full pitcher, and then they all drink out of it, and then they all fill it back up, and that's basically what an egregor is. When two or more people come together for a common purpose, they create this team spirit, so to speak, something that they can all relate to. And the longer these people are friends, the stronger the feeling of belonging, the feeling of interaction. Like there's that specific style, how sometimes high school buddies, they're always getting together and they still act as if they were in high school and they're like 70, because the egregor of the friendship has to do with like drinking and debauchery and being silly and all those things. So they repeat that every time they get together.
It's something that happens even without intent or without
Absolutely.
anybody knowing, or they're not coming together and say, "Oh, let's do an egregor right now." But
No.
it's something that happens all the while naturally, but with
Yeah.
people that come together, whether with or without awareness, creating that kind of vibe.
And
Yeah, I
everything
guess you could well you could describe it as a vibe too. You know,
yeah.
like in a kind of instantaneous moment, you could have a Gregor kind of appear instantaneously, and that would be kind of like the vibe of the room or the vibe of the party or that kind of thing.
Or the
But it
vibe
can
of the
also be
mask
very,
virus.
Well, the
yeah,
narrative that they've bought into and they're adhering to, right? Because there's a specific mood that they're all engaging in.
Yeah, that would have been my question. No, like,
We're
so is
getting
that?
comments from very aggressive commenters. This
oh
gentleman
yeah.
named Eric F has texted me via other means to make sure that we notice the comments. So he says about egregores that the force has two sides, light and dark, and that the best example is a live sports game where most everyone has felt the energy of a sports game and how like sizzling that can be when people get together.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
So
well, the definition is a group thought form. It can be created either intentionally or unintentionally and becomes autonomous entity with the power to influence. A group with a common purpose, like a family, club, political party, church, or country, can create an egregor for better or worse, depending upon the type of thought that is created by it.
So can it be created for the group as well? Somebody else is creating an intent, or even like, in the example that you brought earlier, like a bad intention or a fearful vibe, and tries to put that upon a certain group.
Well, isn't that what music does?
well, I was just thinking about
That's a good
cadets,
point.
right?
Music is trying to push or manipulate people into a certain vibe, a feeling, literally to relax and move their bodies in certain ways to feel the music. And art does this too. Well, actually, sorry. One of my favorite music quotes. I can't remember who said it. Terrible at remembering who said what. But it said, I think it was he said, I can sing a song to like 89 million people, and they will all sing it back to me for 89 million different reasons. And at that point, it's like, it doesn't matter what your point was. You reached those people. You made them think, you made them feel, and you created a bond with them. Like, that's what you did. Like,
Or maybe you created a bond, well, you facilitated them creating a bond with a part of themselves that, they might have been not aware or not as aware as before. So it's like the song, the harmony, the notes, the egregor, the vibe that you transferred through your song help them to connect with something within themselves that they discovered, and that appreciation for making that clear, or for bringing that energy up in their lives, is what connects you then again with them.
Well, I think I think there's also, think about like when music was music before there was videos to the music, and then think about how videos have transformed music so that like if you hear the music, you think of the video, and that's kind of that symbology that represents something about the music that the person that created the video, that's that's the egregor, right? Because there is something about it that comes from the symbology of it as well. So there's like that, being it's a thought form, it is like a symbol that's created that represents a particular energy or thought.
So how important is it then, to be aware of the egregor, of the vibe that is going on in your life in general, and also in the immediate moment? Because, taking Eric's example from earlier, like if you're in a, I don't know, football stadium or so, and like, the vibe is in a certain place, and then, oh, that's maybe sizzling, and that's great, but it can turn around very quickly as well to the other extreme. So it seems to me pertinent then to be aware of of the energy that you that you let into your life, into your moment, and that you take part of, and to do that with attention and with awareness, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's I think one of the points that this Eric F made at a another meeting that one of the other audience or the host members here may have attended, but he made the point of like having a delusional egregor, which one in which like people accept a delusion versus something that's much more positive and creative, like a collective ideas or not necessarily collective ideas, but collaborative ideas that are done, with uh, you know goodness in mind or enlightenment or learning, those kind of things. So like what like modern political philosophy is kind of perpetuating these days is like this major delusion, which kind of embodies like ignorance and stupidity and desperation, and people are essentially at each other's throat
Like,
because there's this big vibe going on that just keeps getting more and more energy put into it.
I think that's what I call we live in idiocracy.
Yeah, yeah.
We lived
but
in it when
it,
it came out, and now even more.
but that's the thing is like when you're kind of involved in that, similar to and I think this example actually talks about the Nazis in Nazi Germany, as and Adolf Hitler as kind of creating that Nazi egregor that like kind of overtook that society, and essentially took them down a road that was not a good place. We're kind of involved in a similar thing today, where it's leading us down this path. And because everybody, like just like with the mask example, some people are doing it for different reasons. But if like the leader and the people that are broadcasting it, and they say that mask is a symbol of our unity, and it's all about fear, that's that's how they can adapt that to the purposes of what they want people to believe.
I had a experience today over the last 2 3 days actually, which was kind of, it was hard, but it was easy at the same time to make that decision. But it took me a while to phrase and to express it, because there, at the daughter at my daughter's school, there is this opportunity that has been planned for months, that I was going to give her input and work for a few days actually with the children. And now they're all split up into groups, so I could have done it like in more days without a problem, and the teacher was really open for it. And then there's so many things like about capoeira and permaculture, and giving ideas, designing the schoolyard, and the school is very open in a way as well. But then also we have this whole masquerade thing going on. And so I have my opinion about that, and I respect everybody else's opinion. But then also my daughter, she decided to go anyway, and they kind of loosened it up 2 weeks ago a little bit, because for her it's important to see her friends, even if it's just part of them. um, but and, and her
this
teachers and
part
stuff.
this part
But
over
anyway,
here.
yeah, exactly. but, but anyway, so so the question then was, so I was asked, like, are we still gonna do it? So the teacher said, no, we got the go ahead from the principal. We are allowed to do it, but we have to respect the rules and wait. And so I did like a research again about statistics and what's going on and the rules here, and I actually found out that it's by the ministry, it's not how to say it in English, as an obligation, but it's more um you're supposed to, you should, but it's
A
different.
Recommendation.
suggestion.
Suggestion, yeah. So it's actually a suggestion, but they put the words differently, so it sounds like you have to, but you don't really have to. But anyway, so like I wrote like a huge letter, and I said, I want to work with the children. I want to do this. Like, I'm looking forward to it. I have a bunch of ideas, and we could still do it, and I'm up for it. And the teacher was very interested as well of going forward, and she already opened the doors. But she said, well, we have those things, and if you go outside, we have to keep distance, but we don't have to wear the mask stuff. But if you're inside here, we still have to, and this and that. And then I just said, well, based on my own, on one of the biggest rules that I have, which is that my work mustn't hurt the children or the people I work with. So, based on my research and my findings, like this stuff is hurting, or can potentially be dangerous as well. And so it would be hypocrisy, like if I say one thing and then act differently. So I said, I will do it, I will come, but I won't wear a mask. And I have my paper that I don't have to wear one. And I won't enforce anything with the children, like I can't enforce something that I'm not doing on them. So I stated it clearly, and I made some suggestions, but she wrote back that she even went to the principal and she discussed it, and like she was explaining their side, which is like a really tough one too, because they're like half of the parents there, and that plays into what you said earlier, Mike, is like they're like, oh my god, like it's like you allowed them to go outside in the break time without the thing on their face again. No, you can't do that, that's too much already. So they have like, at least half of the parents like freaking out because they ease off a little bit, and they do what they can to actually make it more easier for the children to actually be there. And then yeah, so that was a big thing like for the last few days. So I thought like I have to stand up for my own moral and ethical views, and
Well,
just not do what I would love to do anyway because of that, and then hope that others eventually will follow suit. Because if everybody just follows and wants to do a good thing, it's like, oh yeah, like I want good, and like we want to make it as easy and as possible within the rules and stuff, but then everybody follows the rules. But if the rules are foolishness and nobody else turns the other way, then everybody's going to go along with whatever
It's
foolishness is
the
being played.
Emperor's New Clothes. Do you know that story?
Yeah, big time.
I
So
don't know
I'm the little
personally.
baby. He's naked.
well, but
We are.
this is the thing is like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And,
Yeah.
the fact that we've got these examples throughout history of people thinking they're doing the right thing and then a giant disaster happening because people aren't thinking. And this is kind of like, how do you combat a situation in which you get like a country that has, or a world that gets like this group think that that allows delusion to become, the majority thought. So how do you do that? Well, I think that this is a really good opportunity to like introduce this idea. And I think one of the big things that I kind of skewed from the discussion about the egregore is the idea that it's not just one person that initiates it, it's a group of people that initiate it.
Two
So
or
like
more. It says in the Bible, where two or more of you gather, I will be there in spirit, right?
In my name, yeah.
My name.
yeah, and I think this is kind of one of the things is that like how we go about changing the mentality of a larger group is through like creating a smaller group that like reassures each other that, yeah, this makes sense. This doesn't make sense over here. What they're doing doesn't make sense. This makes sense. And so then growing that egregor through adding people to it, but by, essentially creating that opportunity to add energy to something that it might be a better alternative. So creating the opportunity to create the alternative idea or concept that then makes that first egregor, if it's bad, or possibly it's not bad, but there's another option that might be better. So but how do we go about doing that? That's where this egregor idea comes in, I think, as is a really sound way to affect things in a way that you don't have to shoot guns at people. You don't even have to like get them to vote. You can just like create your circle of people and then just start adding energy to it. And if it
Yeah, because
gathers the right kind of energy.
in every group there are those unspoken rules that talk about the standards that that group adheres to, right? So in the University of Reason, for example, where we're all students at, we have certain standards, standards of excellence, standards of helpfulness, standards of understandings or knowledge, I guess. Understanding is not a good word these days. um, what other standards do we adhere to at the University of Reason?
Um, Schedule your own success. Do it live. These are all things that
Fail forward, fail
come into
often.
play. Absolutely. Yeah, and
So
certainly like parhesia. I guess that's another one, right? Go
Sam?
I
ahead.
wanted to take it back to what you were saying about like creating your small groups, and then your group is a little bigger and a little bigger, and you're like cultivating this egregor energy. And of course, my mind, it's kind of like the blessing and the curse of trauma. My mind goes to worst case scenario. What happens when you get people who are really messed up and they don't want to fix
But the
themselves, or
thing
they
is,
don't know how? Hold on, I'm not done.
I know.
Uh, what happens when you have someone who is sick, a sick part of the egregor? They are now a part of the egregor, meaning they might infect other people. And I think the human reaction is, maybe it's not the human reaction. Maybe I think a common reaction is to look at it with disgust and try and cut out anything that's infected, instead of healing it, instead of looking at it and saying, "Ooh, man, that's messed up. That's that's yucky. We need to clean that out, man. You deserve to be healthy. You know that's not healthy, right?" And like not treating it with not treating them with disgust, but
Well, but
appropriately
there are
labeling like these actions, these are symptoms, like you have a lot of sickness in you, we need to heal this. I think that's the only way you keep your egregor safe. That was the end of it.
and we always try that at the University of Reason, right? We always do our best to educate, inform, encourage, support.
And we can only do as best as we know how to be, meaning each day, each interaction we have, we're gonna know more. And there's a lot of shame when, like, say you deal with one person one day and you're like, man, I don't know how to help you, and then the next day you get it figured out and you help like 4 people, and you're like, man, I'm so sorry that like I couldn't help you yesterday. Like maybe that could have been pivotal for you if you could have just changed yesterday instead of today. I know it's not that simple, but like there is still, like, we do the best that we can at the point that we're at.
Oftentimes you don't
Well,
even realize like how small of a thing you can actually make a huge difference in somebody else's life. And we just the other week we quickly mentioned that experiment in human behavior, and we have been the most studied species on Earth, not not without reason. I guess it's precisely because we are where we are because we have been studied for not only for decades but for centuries actually, in order to make what's going on right now even more perfect and more seamless, and to be so predictable as human beings. But what I was going to point out is in terms of the group and the size of the groups and the difference that we can make even as an individual or as a small group as compared to like a large audience. It was never the majority that steered things around or that turned things around when when if you look at history. And um, and there have been those experiments where there's a group and the trial person came inside and he was part of a group, and then there was the presenter, and I think it was two lines, and it's like, oh, there's two lines, one is longer than the other one, and the group says, oh, the right one is the short one, but it's not. It's obvious that it's the long one. So but everyone in that classroom, in that room, says, oh, it's the short one, it's the short one. And the guy who's not in the know of the experiment, he's like, he agrees with it, and almost everybody agrees with the group. But the thing is that if in that large group and they all say the wrong thing, if there's only one person that says, no, you guys are wrong, then the one who is being experimented upon also is much more likely to also speak his own truth, what really is the truth for him, and not follow suit. Although there's still like an overwhelming majority who disagrees and who says something different from what he or she would believe. But if there's only one person, then it's so much more likely that he or she expresses himself as the truth that he or she sees in that moment. And I think that is really amazing. That means that, like a few of us, with what we do, not like, not even like preaching or so, but just like living, living life, and expressing how we see the world with our eyes, that can be inspiring for many other people, and that can actually inspire those who don't dare or are too afraid, to speak up, to actually, stand up for what they truly believe is true.
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of evidence that like when human behavior, like when it gets to a certain point where it goes over the edge, like where people are getting killed and stuff like that. Usually there's a like a real strange tipping point where only if a few people acknowledge that there's something wrong, that people will regain their senses and not go over the cliff. And honestly, Dale Brown like uh, pointed out an instance where a group of people, there was this was, I guess, in Detroit. There was like a star athlete, and his girlfriend was antagonizing him or something like that. And the group of people essentially took her and threw her off of a bridge. And, it was a, bad situation to say the least, but it was one of the things that kind of made him decide that he was going to, try and make a difference in people's life, and train people on like what to do in bad situations. And he strongly believes in nonviolence as a way of solving a lot of problems. And so he's trained young kids, 8 9 year old kids, on kind of like what to do in dangerous situations. And he has examples of where a couple like 10-year-old girls essentially kind of swayed a group of people that were kind of hysteric because of like a drive-by shooting or something, from doing something really crazy.
He
And
basically
so
he basically taught them how to create and maintain their own egregor, their own space, so that they don't get
yeah, and
swept up.
just yeah,
When you're done, I
yeah.
have a lot to say about. I think this is a biological process.
Yeah, and actually, I was just listening to another tape from Robert Sapolsky, who's like a evolutionary biologist out of Stanford, and he talks about a lot of like the studies that animals, like what evolution has done to animals and so forth. And he basically points out that animals that are separated, so like there's a large group of animals, and for one reason or another, that group or a smaller group is created that's separated from the larger group. That smaller group actually will collaborate better, and they will actually become the stronger form of that larger, like population. So the smaller group, because of like their collaborative effort, ends up being better prepared for existing than the larger group that's could potentially be aggressive towards each other. And so that's another thing that kind of demonstrates to me, which is like collaboration, how important collaboration is even demonstrated to us in the animal world, and so that's kind of one of the keys. That's also something I bring up in my ethical emergence course, was what I call superpower groups, is this idea that like working with other people can can solve so many problems that like we as individuals just can't overcome. And so we need other people's input to really be, to take that next step. And so coming back around to the egregor, that's kind of where, okay, we talk to the people that we have some kind of agreement with, and we start that energy there, and then we invite other people in. Go ahead.
Um, so earlier, when I think it was Agnieszka, and she was describing like kind of what it feels like to be swept up in the egregor of things. And actually, when you were talking to Mike, it reminded me of a conversation I had with someone around a campfire somewhere, and we were talking about drinking whiskey and friends and trauma, and how like when you went back to go hang out with those friends, if you weren't drinking, it didn't feel the same. It was just different. You couldn't vibe anymore, and it almost irritated you. And just the feeling of like needing to vibe with people or needing something to like be on a certain in that egregor, um it just really reminded me of like the trauma bonding. That sounds like a negative manifestation of an egregor. And the reason I think, I tell my clients all the time and myself that this is a normal human reaction. We are all mammals. We all need to be in a collaborative group because Bessel van der Kolk actually had, I think it was a couple weeks ago during the whole thing that's going on currently, he was talking about how we develop our sense of safety, our nervous systems um, calm down when we have synchronicity with other and attunement with other people in our group. And when we don't, it's much harder to calm down. So I think that our bodies and our brains are naturally like, we want to be swept up in the egregor, but we don't know which one we should choose. And we haven't been told. It's almost like we're dealing with magic and we don't even know that we're dealing with it. So you don't know if you're choosing good magic or if you're using evil magic, or
Well,
if you're somewhere
and
in
we're
between,
told-
and what the consequences are. You don't
We're
know
told
anything.
magic doesn't exist, so how could we choose good or bad when it doesn't even exist? So it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what you choose because magic doesn't exist. But that's not
And
even
it's something
true.
you can't see and you can't really measure. It's not. It is literally an experience, which is extremely hard to describe.
Quantify.
It's hard to describe and quantify, especially to people who are resistant. Like my husband, I admire him so much because he is not swayed by that. Like, in fact, when he starts feeling that, he's like, no, I choose my, he doesn't call it the egregor, but he's like, no, I choose how I feel when I feel it. And I've always admired that because for a very long time, I would just that's part of the reason I loved clubs, because I would get swept up in the music, literally, and I could just leave my body, or I didn't feel half my body, and it felt amazing. I was also drinking quite a bit, too, so that also kind of numbed me out. Like, that whole egregor of just, like, feeling better by feeling numb kind of thing. Yeah.
It feels to me that the egregor, if it's done consciously and with awareness, then it could be, or it is really like an effective strategy to overcome the all surrounding strategy of divide and conquer that we're really facing in every way. And I was just thinking when you were talking earlier, there have been like a series of protests here, regular protests of people who disagree with the lockdown measurements, and they had to struggle a lot in order to get the right to even do so, which was taken, here in Germany, like the basic right of assembly and of expressing and putting up, you would call it the constitution, which we don't even have. But anyway, so but one of the measurements that were taken eventually when they were when courts would allow people in small numbers and under certain conditions to go out and express themselves, then the condition was always to have this safety margin, so you couldn't stand closer than a meter and a half or 2 meters to the next person, which is like physically a divide and conquer, because that's actually like it's a methodology of crowd control. So if you look at crowd control, police, law enforcement handbooks, like how you deal with crowds is like to break them up so you don't have to deal with the crowd. Because if you have
Right.
like
They
a
don't
bunch
feel they don't feel as powerful when they're
Yeah.
kind of separated.
and they are just easier to control, because you're not dealing with one something, but you're dealing with a bunch of individuals. And it's the same thing in capoeira as well. In capoeira we have what we call a roda, which is a circle. So if you watch from afar and you see like one something, one group, you don't know what it is, but it's like one something, and there's a bunch of people standing together doing something, and there's music and vibes, and that is a sign of quality, of a good capoeira circle, of good capoeira roda. But if you look from far and you see looks like a bunch of individuals, standing around and doing something, but you cannot see the group. I guess we could call it the egregor now. Then that's like, okay, that's weak. That's not really how it could be. And yeah, so I feel the the egregor really can be a strategy to overcome the divide and conquer, which is done like on a collective level, but also like on a family level, and even like on an individual level as well, where we are separated from our true self, from our true power, from that potential that we have within ourselves. And yeah, I can totally see how we can consciously use that and cherish it and make it something that really can transform our life and the bad situation that we're in right now as humanity.
Well, that's the thing is that, like, because this is kind of an esoteric term, and because it isn't mainstream, most people don't know about it. Most people don't understand what it is. Obviously, we're sitting here talking about it, and there's a lot of things about that we don't quite understand, but it's pretty obvious that the other side understands. The powers that be understand this, and this is how they get people at each other's throats. This is how they get people to go into a civil war with each other, because they establish two competing egregors that essentially, create the animosity between two different groups of people. And
And
that is absolutely what they're doing. I mean, that
I'm gonna
is absolutely clear.
I want to add on and then link that up to my topic that I wanted to that Dennis made me think of. Maybe I'll just go back to that topic that I was thinking of because I lost my train of thought. Okay, the two parties, like the two egregors. If you don't fit into those egregors and you don't vibe with those egregors, you can't fit in. You can't force yourself to be in an egregor. It causes a lot of tension.
You either adjust or you leave.
Yeah, you either adjust or leave. There is no in between. There's no pretending. So if you don't fit in, that causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress because you don't have a group. Military individuals feel this after coming out of the military because no matter, like, I can't understand what my husband went through in the military because I wasn't there. His buddies can, and it took me a long time to get over that and just be like, you know what? They were going to understand that, and there's my friends are going to understand me better. But let me tie this back to what Dennis was saying. I think that this ability to like create our egregor when under attack, under the current situation that we're having with the social distancing, and we can't be around each other. And I just pulled up a couple articles. Granted, it's in California, so I mean, there's that. But they are banning singing in churches because, oh dear God, how
It's cool
dare
too.
we have
You
a
can't sing.
local ceremony?
They've
and
tried
all
banning
God,
singing.
literally.
They've tried banning singing before in the 1300s and in the 1500s. There's been many times in the past where singing was banned in different countries.
Well, it's just singing in churches.
It's cool too. Like that same example I gave
That
earlier,
specifically.
I wasn't allowed to sing. I would not have been allowed to sing with him. And then how you do capoeira without singing, that just can't work. What I wanted to add on to what Mike you were saying earlier about the two groups, about collaboration, and what comes to my mind is that in capoeira, for example, again, there has to be a balance between collaboration and competition. And that example that you gave before as well, like, to me, so it was collaboration within the small group that separated itself from the bigger group, but at the same time it became a competition, right? Because now it was two groups. So
Yeah.
so if there's a healthy balance, then real growth can happen right there. Because if I'm playing inside the capoeira circle with somebody, and in one moment, like, there's competition, it's like, okay, let me try get one in. But if it gets in, then I will control my foot and I will stop it and make sure he doesn't get hurt. But I want to get in, like, I want to get the hit in, so everybody can see, wow, that was in. If I would have wanted, I could have taken him down or whatever, but I didn't.
Mhm.
So there's a competition and collaboration at the same time, because I collaborate with him, I protect him at the same time, like I compete and I try compete with myself and with everybody else. It's like, so there's many levels of that. But I feel in life it's important to have that, to have like a healthy competition, and to always be in mind that in nature as well, there's this erroneous, I feel, belief of, like, uh, I would say only the strongest survives, and so which goes back, to Darwin. But it's not only that. There's competition and there's
I don't
collaboration.
know.
If you
Have
look
you
at
actually
plants,
read The Origin of Species? It's a pretty complex book, and they just took like one chapter and sort of quoted it out of context. And then I don't know. I think that there's a lot more to the origin of, to Darwin specifically than we talk about in schools.
there's a lot
He talks
to
about
him
competition
and
and he
his
talks
family
about
as well.
collaboration. He talks about how some plants and animals actually work together.
That and his most famously quoted words are incorrect. It is not survival of the strongest or the fittest. It is survival of the most adaptable, which is a whole different story.
Hey,
Yeah.
Willow, are you keeping an eye on the Facebook comments?
No.
Well,
In my defense, I don't see any.
okay.
Oh, I see a whole
Oh
bunch.
wait, I see one.
Uh-oh.
I see Chris McMillan says Darwin was an actual racist.
Oh no, Chris,
That I cannot disagree with.
Chris also said stuff before that, a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh, now I'm
you
getting.
just have to look at the actual title of his book.
Well, he may have been like one of the first purveyors of social distancing too, if you think about it. Because he was trying to social distance the other races and stuff.
Chris
So
says
they've been
that
social distancing for a while.
Chris says that everybody knows a little bit about Darwin. It's all different stuff. He says that Darwin was an actual racist and gave the globalists the golden ticket excuse they were looking for to start killing the lesser people. I don't think that's when it's. I think that
So,
started
I
before
heard-
Darwin.
I had heard that yes, he was a racist. He was looking for a reason, and that his words got twisted into survival of the strongest and fittest, and that was the green light for everyone. And I want to say it was like his brother or his cousin or something, someone close to him that twisted like what he said. But it doesn't really matter because yeah, the actual guy Darwin himself, even though he was correct, survival of the most adaptable is probably how we evolved. It makes sense. Just because that one thing is probably right doesn't mean that he himself was in any way, shape, or form a good person, because the next comment is also true. He thought the Irish were the lowest ranking of humanity. He actually thought they were subhuman.
And I think that's
The Irish of all people.
But remember, we also saw that CIA paper that was like obfuscating history and changing history and stuff. That's part of that whole movement that to shift the understanding. So yeah, the Irish had to die because they knew too much. And I mean, think about the Irish are like the Polish. How many times did the Irish have to die? They went in the 900s. All the Irish have to die. Then the 1300s. I don't know if I have the years right, but there were a few times where people went into Ireland saying, "Okay, you guys are done," and they're persistent.
I think the Irish actually demonstrated some very savvy ideas, and that's probably why they had to be eliminated, and probably similar why a lot of the other races are, under attack, is because they do represent some value that we're not paying attention to, but we probably should be. And there again is another reason that we should be creating an egregor that essentially says, let's
What do you
open
mean
our
we
eyes.
should be?
Let's
We
not.
have been. We have been.
Okay, we are. All right. But let's be a little bit more intentional about it. Let's really like pump it up and turbocharge and supercharge it.
I started being intentional about it in January of 2019.
I think you just gave a whole new meaning to the title of our show, because it totally was like, what the F are we gonna talk about? We don't really know. But in reality, when you're wanting to change the conversation, from what happened on Game of Thrones last season, which the last season sucked, by the way, just seeing if anyone cared.
I still haven't seen one show yet.
I just read the book.
Congratulations! I have to give,
I'm sharing that
people
egregor with you,
credit.
Mike.
I'm too easily swayed by dragons and magic. It's just a draw for me. I will admit it. But like when you want to switch the conversation from the shit that's on TV, the entertainment that can be fun, it can be bonding, it can be a great time, but when that's all you're having and you want to switch it to what
Something
happened
more
on 9/11
substantial.
or what, like what are they putting in our food? What am I putting in my body? What, when you're wanting to change the conversation, you actually literally have to start asking yourself, what the fuck am I talking about? What am I talking about?
Yeah.
Well, most are talking about the topics that are given to us from early on. The chatter and the trivia that we are supposed to chat about.
Sam, did you see that comment from Chris where he calls you the dark overlord of your melancholy? Mwahahaha.
No, I didn't. I don't understand one of those words, but it sounds like I'm on board with that.
Melancholy?
Yeah, melancholy. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought,
It's
okay,
just
it
my
sounded like you were
accent.
saying melancholy. I was like, I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds cool.
It's just my accent, just my Polish accent.
I like that. That's a wonderful compliment. Thank you, Chris.
There you go. He just keeps complimenting us.
Thank you.
Don't
So,
worry,
like,
Chris. We only talked about Game of Thrones for like 10 seconds and then we went right by it.
So, to me, and I don't know if we want to conclude the conversation on McGregor and move on to something else, but I would say that pretty much all the things that are going on in the world are really the delusional egregors that have been created, and they've gotten very good at doing it. And we really need to get up to speed on how do we do that for ourselves, and how do we do it for the groups of people around us, our families, and all of our social groups, so people start to feel supported when it comes to asking questions about why are things the way they are. Because like Dennis was saying, the court says this, you got to stay within 6 feet. Well, where's the evidence? Why isn't any, who is the people that's representing
The
the other side of that
evidence
argument?
the evidence is for 15 feet. There's no evidence for 6 feet at all.
Yeah, well, as far as I can tell, there is no, and so like in any decision that people are making, there's got to be at least two sides. So if there's a affirmative, then what's the opposite of that? Why wouldn't we do that? If there's a reason why we would do it, there's probably a reason why we wouldn't do that. And the fact that the majority of society waits till some higher up authority says this is what we're going to do
And even a third
without
one
any
too, right?
question. Oh, definitely.
Even a third one, like oftentimes both, the left and the right wing are controlled. Like, there's, the thesis, and there's the antithesis, and then whoop, you have a left and a right wing, you have a red and a blue, or whatever the colors are, but then you have one head of the bird that's controlling both of the wings. So then it's like, what is
Yeah.
the third way, really? That's
Yeah, well, the typical Hegelian dialectic, which like the thesis and the antithesis and then the synthesis, which is what they're after in the first place, but they're going to create the two sides that essentially take them to where they want to go.
so they can predict the outcome.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
but
thought it
that's
was when we were reading the definition in the other meeting earlier today, and you talked about the theosophists calling them the watchers. The egregors are the watchers. And so essentially, when the egregor is so powerful and it lasts for so many decades or centuries, right, it becomes like the watcher because it's bigger than any member of that, or it's more powerful than any member that joins that group or that club or that country or that school or that sorority, or you know what I mean, any kind of. So the egregor is almost like an overshadowing figure. It's not a real physical presence, but there is an actual presence that overshadows it.
yeah.
And I think it's interesting they call it the watchers. Anyway, go ahead.
So what came to my mind then is, because was it the last show when we briefly spoke about traditions and lineages and things being passed on, so that egregor, as I understand it right now, like and please correct me if I'm wrong, it is something that is not confined to what I can just see, hear, and smell, but it's something, that surpasses, knows maybe lifetimes, centuries, even thousands of years, and that's something you then can potentially connect to and step into or tap into without, physically having experienced a group of beings that hold that energy. But it's you just said, Agnieszka, you said presence. So it's a presence that you can come into. It's a vibe, a energy that you can tap into without having to, do physical step A, B, C. But it's something that you can accumulate and tap into, or that you can access. Maybe that is a better word, because that potential is there within you and it has been there in the past. So how powerful um, of a thought is that, or of a notion is that, that you can tap into the energy, into the vibe, into the egregor of people who would have come before you, and who would have created something,
There's a whole
truly
holiday
powerful.
about it, Dennis. It's the 31st of October. It's a whole holiday called Grandpa's Day or Ancestors Day, where we tune into the power of our ancestors. But now it's been somehow changed into the Dead People's Day. And it's not quite the same as Ancestors Day or when we go to the grave of our ancestor and tune into their power. That's what it was supposed to be like centuries ago. But hang on, because
So
there is a question
yeah.
in the thing, and I just wanted to quickly address it. The answer to your question may be more complex than you're willing to accept, because first of all, we talked about the egregors in the Toastmasters group, Atono Toasters, the Autonomy Toastmasters on Sunday, and there's a lovely 5 minute speech from Eric Fairland, who talks about the essence of it and how it could be good or bad, or it could be part of you, or you're part of many of them. And then we talked about it today during that town hall. So the Monday town hall also has the whole episode, I guess, on the definition and how it works and what it does. Like 25 minutes of it, and then to this is a follow up to all those other meetings. So we've been talking about the egregors a lot. So if Chris wants to catch up in the whole offer, those other two meetings need to be consumed as well. I haven't posted the
I
replay for
was
the,
actually
but I
going to
will.
attempt to answer Chris's question as well, because was not aware that there were two previous longer conversations
Hold on, what is the
about it.
question?
So, well, the question
Yeah, yeah,
is,
that'd be good.
do the egregors take into account there may be many out there who can see through their game, and would this concern them at all? And what I took from that is one, I'd have to clarify what kind of egregor are you talking about, because not all egregors are equivalent or equal. Um, if you were talking about fake egregors, like ones that are created for us, that are drawing us in, um, I would say yes, they do take into account that there are people out there who see through it, and no, they don't care, because it's not a logical game. This is a experience game. This is an emotional game. This is, does it draw you in? And what I was gonna mention this earlier, but this is actually a better time to bring it up. I feel like the SJW thing is a fake egregor, and I have watched many compassionate, loving, wouldn't hurt a fly, would give you the shirt off their back kind of
Hot topic.
people
It's all good.
who are part of like the SJW. They're really into like making social justice happen on all different levels, and it makes me very sad because I can see their empathy to take care of other people, and their
You're
drive to
talking
take care of
about
other people.
the Karens out there, the social
No,
justice.
no, not Karens, not Karens.
No.
Karens are like tattletales as adults. I'm talking more like people who out there who think that like who call me, say that I lack empathy for the human race and I want people to die because I don't agree with socialized healthcare. Like, I understand you're worried about people's health and you're trying to protect people. I just don't happen to agree on how you're going to do it. But this egregor is based, like the whole leftist and SJW mentality is help people recognize trauma, doing stuff like that, and it creates a false egregor. It creates this group identity of validation and affirmation that they equate with love.
So now Chris says he's referring to the globalists behind all this. And I don't think, like an egregor, we have many egregors in autonomy and University of Reason. Like, it's not just the bad ones. They're every group of two or more humans that get together has an egregor. So it's not like, yeah, we can identify the egregors that different people have in different incarnations, but it doesn't make the egregor itself bad.
Well, let me see if I can try and answer this because, like, look, think about Santa Claus as an egregor. So there's people that believe in Santa Claus, and those for those people, it's a powerful experience. And certainly, if they get into a larger group of people that believe in Santa Claus and they see, people with their houses decorated, and they're all getting into the Christmas thing and stuff like that. And for the people that don't believe in that, they can see them, but they they can't really connect with them, right? Because they have like a feeling inside them about Santa Claus. And for those other people, they just feel like, oh well, it's their bad fortune that they don't believe in Santa Claus. So to some degree, in some instances, it is like that inviting feeling that makes them feel part of something that's more important or more magical. But when other people don't believe, they're just like, well, that's their thing, whatever. They're probably going to get consumed by the devil or something. I don't know. Another egregor, by the way. But that's kind of the thing, is there is kind of an energy to kind of creating a group that has that symbol, you know, and that is really an important thing. That obviously, like Gustave Le Bon, he wrote The Crowd in 1896, and it's obvious that is kind of the one of the Bibles that like the propagandists and stuff look to. So that they understand that the crowd is important. Getting the crowd into a mindset that they can utilize is very important.
You have
When
to
you
buy
were
into it, isn't it? Like if you, unless to some degree you buy into that egregor, those that try to take you over, that you can't be touched by it. Unless on some kind of level you're in a fear mode and it's like, oh my god, like I'm gonna die as well, and the virus and or whatever it is. It's like, if you don't have none of that, if you're truly calm and rested and centered in your true self, to repeat that, then it takes one to want to influence or manipulate you, and it takes another one to be open or to be vulnerable for that. So if
You know
you
that money lady, that Sarah McCrum, that was lecturing at the University of Reason a couple weeks ago? She was talking about that. She was talking about how it's the most important thing is to keep your attention on being positive and not giving in to worry and just, working toward the good of all. Haha. Eric says if you can't think, someone will do it for you. And that
and they use that as an excuse.
they hammer
Like
your
it's
ability
written
to
down
think in
in their books
school
as well.
out of your
They
head.
say, they call people cattle and they call them brainless monkeys and whatever else, because and they're pointing out that people are not using their potential and their ability, to use their mind and to stand up for their own selves and to step into their power. And they take that as an invitation, to take over your life and to take your power away from you. And
Yeah, and again, I think that potentially is another egregor that a lot of us even fall victim to when we categorize people as sheeple. Are we just giving up on their ability to be human just like us? If we accept them as sheeple rather than as people that we can uh, approach and talk to, we're doing ourselves a disservice by kind of creating that mentality that suggests that they're just idiots. They're just going to let other people think for them, and they'll just do whatever they're told.
I think what you're saying is perfectly valid, and needs to be put into practice. But I also think that there's a certain value in not expecting, like, you don't expect a toddler to know what's, calculus. You just
Yeah.
don't expect it. You don't get mad when they don't know calculus. You don't get irritated. There's a certain level of expectation when you know you're dealing with a sheep. If you want to call them a sheep, fine, call them a sheep. Don't shear them until they're bloody. Take care of the sheep. Be nice to the sheep. Feed them good food. You don't have to be an asshole to them. You don't have to like lock them away and but if you have the opportunity to be like, hey, here, let me
And
help
pretty
you a little
soon
bit.
the sheep will lock us away.
Well,
Yeah,
that's why
that's
you
kind
carry
of
a
the
big
problem
stick.
is the the sheep eat everything that you own, and then you're like out there in the middle of nothing.
That's why you have fences. You protect your property.
So
I'm
then
But
they
just
find
meaning
out that
like
we don't really own
you
yeah,
don't
anything,
need
isn't
like
it?
you don't have to be like, hey, I know that you're not really competent. I know that you don't understand these topics, but I'm still gonna like try and talk to you about them. I think that's cruel. Like, you're just talking to them
Well, but
about
I
stuff they don't
you
understand.
you maybe you don't approach them on that particular topic. You approach them on something that you do have in common. But think about also like some of the stores that have come about in like the last 20 years. Like for example, Starbucks. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I don't know anything about Starbucks. I've probably been in there like 5 or 10 times my whole life, and I just don't see why. But there's something there that takes people to Starbucks, and then it's like you see like 50 cars lined up to get into Starbucks. There's something going on there
it's
that
I know what it is. Starbucks lets you pretend that you're an adult by buying a coffee, but it's really a dessert made for children with a lot of sugar and whipped cream and stuff. And so they're
There's
yeah.
so much
feeding their
sugar.
inner child through. And I mean, every like twice a year, I get a Starbucks, or at Christmas when they have those coconut ones, or no, maybe that's in summer. I don't know, but yeah, occasionally there are some good ones. But it's not really a coffee; it's more like a cheesecake.
It makes you feel like an adult because yeah, it's like having your dessert after you've finished your meal. You're like, I'm so adult. I'm so adulting that I'm able to go buy myself a coffee that someone else makes. And I'm being responsible because I'm getting a coffee before work. It's bad coffee
So,
too. And now
Eric,
that I make my own coffee, it tastes so bad. And I used to
well,
love Starbucks. I had a gold membership card.
so they over roast their coffee just a little bit to give you that slightly burnt taste so that you can recognize their coffee and crave their coffee. This is an actual marketing scheme that Starbucks did. I'm not joking. So they over roast it just a tiny bit to have that slightly burnt taste. And then you theoretically won't like any other coffee because you only like Starbucks coffee.
because it's identifiable to you. Huh?
Yeah.
And they also do
Interesting.
this like hidden menu. Like they pretend like there's an actual hidden menu. There's really not. You just order whatever you want, basically. But they make it like exclusive and like
You
secret.
can go on the
That was the thing for
internet and
me.
find the hidden menu and then order
But that
things.
I was going there, like getting a coffee before I went to school, and I just, I was like, oh, this is a nice thing to do before I get to school. I like having something to drink in class. And then they started telling me things like, if you sign up for that card, like all these coffees that you're drinking, they're going to add up to like more coffees. And the more coffees you get, the more higher membership you get. And then you have to maintain that membership by buying at least 12 coffees a month. And yeah, eventually I
damn.
started using my card to open up doors, and I think I lost it.
But that is another example of an egregor, and they are advancing that in all those different ways, and certainly they're understanding the psychology of their client base and what they're doing. But at the same time, it's interesting that they kind of create the circumstance where there's like a line of cars so that people are drawn to this idea, like you were saying earlier, Dennis, about Like when you see a group of people and they're kind of organized and they got a purpose, and you're like, huh, what is that? They must be doing something right. Whereas if it's all kind of, disorganized and stuff like that, it was like, ah, whatever, you know, it draws people to that. And to me, that suggests that understanding of egregor.
I feel it seemed essential to me to actually have that, your own individuality expressed through your own egregor first. If you don't have that first, like how then you're gonna be prone to, you're gonna be drawn to any egregor. I feel, that's being offered to you, and there's no lack of them, and we discussed a few even just now. So, but I feel unless you really have tapped into your own power, for the lack of a better word, then you're gonna feel that lack, that there's something to be felt, and you're gonna feel it with whatever is being offered to you. And I think the like so a foundational thing is really like to, to go within again, and to look within yourself and say, oh, what is my power? Where is my potential? Who am I really? To ask that question of all questions, and then to take it from there.
Who's eating the cheesecake?
Who is craving it? Who is the one wanting it?
Me. I'm always craving cheesecake.
Now you are.
No, always. I heard cheesecake, I was like,
There's a quote, and this is in regards to take care of the sheep speech that Sam said or Willow said earlier, but Eric is quoting the Bible, Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 3:2. I have fed you with milk and not with meat, for hitherto ye were not able to bear it, neither yet now are ye able. So
Beautiful.
I didn't feed you with meat because you couldn't handle meat, and you still can't handle meat. It's basically what it says. So
By
I'm
the
gonna
way,
give you some more milk.
I like that. That was beautiful. And also, it's Corinthians. It's not Corinthians. There's an N in there. Corinthians.
I said Corinthians. I just have a weird accent.
Oh, it sounded like it was Corinthians.
Thank you.
It's just
No.
making sure you said it right.
I thought about that quote from Nidhi Krishnamurti when you were touching upon calling people names, sheeps or whatever other names, and he was pointing out that anytime you call somebody, whether it's a white, black, European, Indian, this and that, whatever, anytime you call somebody a name, what you essentially do is you breed violence, because you're separating yourself from whoever you're calling, whatever name. And I think that is a pretty straight cutting through thing statement right there. As long, as soon as you name somebody with something else but you, then you create a division. You ultimately, that will result in violence.
What if that other person had a completely different experience and you can't label them as you? Does it not dishonor them to not label them as something different? And say, I have never experienced that. I have never seen that.
The experience itself. So are you the experience?
Well, no. But I am having the experience. Or I have not had the experience. I think it can be just as equally healing to say, you and I are not the same. Yet I'm not going to treat you any different. I don't think that dividing I think that dividing, I don't think necessarily that labeling is a divisive tool. I think the overuse and misuse of labeling is a divisive tool.
It is not to take away the uniqueness and the individuality of each one, but it's more to recognize that which we have in common.
Yeah.
Which doesn't, like, one doesn't contradict the other ones. Like we are truly unique.
And this
beings.
also this line of thinking also stems from the fact that I have to be very, very precise with how I use violence, because there are many people in my line of work who don't know the difference. And if I tell them that that is a violent situation, that is something that they need to run away from. Like, they need to get out of. That, like, violence is something.
Yeah, but he was talking more about philosophical, not conversational.
Yeah. And that's why I said my line of thinking stems from the fact that I have to be very, very precise with what I label violence. And while I think that division can lead to violence, I don't think that it is. I would be very hesitant to label it as violence. But I like the overall message. This is my curse. I pick things apart and I'm like, that's a great message. I love that. This is what I think is wrong with it.
That's how you define violence, really. Like to define the terms, of course, would be something. I guess that would clarify a lot. So if you look at violence only as a physical thing, physically hurting your body, then that is one definition of it. But if you take it further, again, acknowledging that we are not only physical beings and that violence could also be extended on other levels, then I feel more that's probably the spirit that he was in the spirit that he was in when he was making that statement.
Here's in the theosophy.wiki on egregore, there's a section called Initiation into Groups. And it talks, I think this is pretty interesting. It says, as a psychic entity, the egregore exists between the material and spiritual worlds and is connected to both. It is a creation of a psychic objectives of the members of that group and exists as a connection to the divine. Anyone involved in a group, whatever kind of group it is, will be affected by the egregore of the group. For those that reach for the spiritual connection, the egregore assists and facilitates that connection. This process is unconscious, but it is intensified through the initiation process, which is designed to open the mind to the spiritual through the egregore. Another paragraph here. The same is true of any organization, be it a church or a civil rights movement, Ku Klux Klan, Taliban, or monastery. Whether the group is organized to do good or evil, indoctrination can happen quickly. As Gustave Le Bon pointed out, as I pointed out as well, reason is not part of the crowd's mentality. Becoming caught up in the passionate hatred or love of an egregore can be hard to resist. An organized group with very strong intentions builds and maintains an egregore with its passion, and the thought form affects new initiates. The power of the egregore to help and sustain a group increases over time through the repeated action, ceremonies, or rituals of its members. The egregore can raise its members from the material and connect them to the divine or to the depths of human depravity. There's a lot there, but I think that explains it pretty clearly.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good one.
What do you
yeah.
think?
that was really good.
So there's definitely something to be said here, and I would say the initiation process, like what we were talking about earlier, the mask wearing, I think is a perfect example of kind of an initiation into in this social distancing in general. I think is kind of an initiation to this, delusional egregore that the powers that be are, trying to implement into the world here. Certainly something to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At the same time,
absolutely.
what I'm realizing is that it brings forth and lets those who already were kind of in doubt or had some kind of knowing. I mean, it creates a gap, but it which locks down the ones that adapt that egregore readily and easily, puts them on one side, and on the other side, those who kind of have felt it before but who didn't really make a step forward. It urges those also, to pick a side, so to say, because it's just so clear. It's out and it's not something like hidden behind some bushes, but it's like out in the open right now. So it is also an opportunity, I feel, to take sides, so to say, and to oh, and take sides not for like a specific group, but to take side for yourself, for your own individuality, for your own ability to reason, and to to think things through, and to don't follow anyone blindly.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we didn't really talk about it, but the opposite side of like what human potential is really freedom. And the more that we give people the freedom to express themselves and be who they can be, is really realizing their potential. And that's certainly something that benefits everybody. And so that's also something that I think we got to keep in mind is that, uh, and that's another area that a lot of people don't understand. What are the benefits of freedom? And maybe that's something we can discuss in some other show. But with that said, I think we're at the end of a show that we just concocted out of our own minds.
And if
Our
you're
own egregor.
and if you're part of the University of Reason, check out the Toastmasters from Sunday, the Town Hall from Monday, and this show, and that will give you the trifecta of the egregor conversations. I'm sure there will be more.
Absolutely. I guess we can go around the room. Does anybody want to have a final thought about what they might have brought from this, or something that was a gem that they want to remind everybody of? How about you, Willow? Anything?
Pay attention to what you're drawn to, what egregors you're drawn to, because we're all going to be drawn to them. There's no shame in that. We all want the things that these egregors make us feel, but we're responsible, just like when we want something sweet. We're responsible for making sure that sweet treat or whatever we want isn't going to harm us in the long run.
Isn't going to be the whole cheesecake.
You know what? We can have a different conversation about how much is an appropriate amount of cheesecake, because for now, it's the whole damn cheesecake. That's my egregor. It's full of cheesecake, and I eat all of it.
I would say if you are in a group of people and you're drawn to doing something that you wouldn't normally do, rethink your membership. That's all. And it doesn't have to be a paid membership. It could be like a group of friends who get together every Saturday for wine or whatever.
I do value very much the the groups that I'm part of, or one could even say the organizations in a way, that allow me to continue to be myself and to live my individuality. So I feel that is really a privilege, and that is actually why I'm still, associating with certain groups and certain people, because they don't restrict me and they don't try to cut me off, or I don't feel like I'm being installed with any dogmas or so. So that is something that actually encourages me, and that is something I look forward doing, exploring with even more awareness and more consciousness, to associate with those that really uplift you and bring you further and help you on your path, and don't use you as a stepping stone on your own path. And so that being said, I'm glad to be with you guys. And I think today really will be, is a moment that brings to our awareness even more, the power and the potential that we have as individuals who come together in this constellation, and with the potential to transform our own selves, and also those who also felt and feel drawn to us and to the egregor that we co-creating with everybody else.
And kudos to Chris Macmillan, who added value, and Eric F., who added value. Thank you, gentlemen.
Big time all the way.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that was the point I was going to make, is that there's a great deal of lack of discernment when it comes to recognizing value versus harm. And this is a term, this is a word, this is an idea that, although most people probably haven't heard of it, it is certainly one in which conveys a great deal of value in some cases and a great deal of harm in others. And it's definitely something that, because of that, needs to be discussed and understood to a great degree. So with that said, thank you so much for taking your time and giving us your attention. We certainly appreciate it. Hopefully this was useful for you today. And I guess that's it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for
check
listening.
out our website.
Yeah, and we'll be back on Wednesday at 7 Eastern, which is, or 7:10 Eastern, which is 4:10 Pacific. Yeah, that's it.
See you on Wednesday.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Hang on, I gotta
Thank
play
you.
the outro. Hang on. Okay, now go.
Bye.
Adios, adios. Auf Wiedersehen.